Anim zmirot v'shirim erog v'shirim erog ki eilecha nafshi sarog nafshi sarog Anim zmirot v'shirim erog v'shirim erog.
The riots that broke out in Jerusalem in the year 66 CE began when the Jews couldn't take Roman curator Gessius Floris's provocations anymore. After torturing them, killing them, and plundering their money, he sends his soldiers to rob the Jews' holiest site, the temple. Enraged, the people of Jerusalem take to the streets to stop the Romans with their own bodies. Using sticks and makeshift swords, they block the Romans' way and repel them. All Jerusalem is pandemonium. Take Elazar ben Hananiah, a young priest who has held a high position in the temple and is sick of being degraded. And he isn't the only one. Around him gather the Zealots, a daring group willing to do anything to put an end to the oppression. Elazar bravely abolishes the most humiliating symbol of oppression, the sacrifice for the emperor's welfare. The official reason given is that, according to Torah law, an offering may not be taken from a Gentile, and Nero is a Gentile par excellence. But everyone knows this is just an excuse. Abolishing the offering is a call for an uprising. And soon, war will break out. The leaders, priests, and elders fear the deterioration of relations with Rome. We must offer the sacrifice again, before we anger the Romans and spark a fire that will consume us all. An argument breaks out among the people. Some say the sacrifice must be offered. Some oppose it vehemently. But the Zealots hadn't come to listen to arguments. Convinced of their righteousness, they incite the crowd against the leaders and speak out against them. A civilized debate? You must be joking. Within minutes, the public gathering turns into a threatening mob. Josephus, the historian, himself a high-ranking priest, happened to be in the temple at that very moment. We were all struck with terror. I began to fear that since I took such a strong stance against rebelling, they'd suspect me too of siding with the enemy and kill me. I hurried away, deep into the temple. It seems the Jewish people are on a collision course with the most powerful empire in the world. But wait, the story isn't over yet. At this very moment, the influential sages are holding an emergency meeting. The sages understand the situation very well. They come to an agreement. Fighting the Romans is too dangerous. If we wish to maintain peace with the Romans, we must sacrifice the offering for the emperor's welfare. All Jerusalem heaves a sigh of relief. Then, just before the meeting is adjourned, a twist in the plot. At the far end of the room, a sage, Rabbi Zechariah ben Avkulos, stands up. He rejects the other sages' arguments and adamantly forbids the sacrificial offering. The Zealots cheer. They don't care that Rabbi Zechariah holds only the minority view. They cling to his radical statement and incite the entire nation to war. The humility of Rabbi Zechariah ben Avkulas destroyed our home, burned our temple, and exiled us from our land. Sometimes words can kill. Rabbi Zechariah's statements and the Zealots' inflaming cries were just words. But those words ignited the fire of war, that burned down the temple, led to the deaths of hundreds of thousands, and sent an entire nation into exile. In the debate over the emperor's offering, Elazar ben Hanani and his comrades the Zealots won, but the victory was achieved through force and violence against their own people, and it was to haunt them like a curse. From now on, all disputes would be resolved the same way, with shouting and threats, and that's called civil war. And in that kind of war, there are no winners. In clashes among Jews, thousands are killed. Entire sections of the city are destroyed, and the stores of food that could have saved the besieged city go up in flames. The madness reaches its peak when Vespasian arrives with a huge army to conquer Jerusalem, and is shocked to find that the Jews are busy slaughtering each other. Better that we sit comfortably and watch from afar, as our enemies kill each other, themselves, and fight one another like madmen. It's easy to be wise in hindsight, but it's hard to know. If war, destruction, and exile of the Jewish people could have been prevented, would open, honest debate, without anger and harsh words, have had different results? A totally different history? Sometimes I wonder what would happen if that kind of debate took place here in Israel today. Would we also be drawn into a maelstrom of hatred, violence, belligerence, and civil war, in which each side sees only its own truth and forgets everything else? Or is that deep scar left by that horrific war so long ago enough to keep us from repeating their mistake? What do you think?
Okay, we're here in the streets of Barcelona, in King's Square. And one very important thing to understand is probably the most bitter aspect of Jewish history that we don't talk about. We hide it under the rug. It's so painful, we won't even mention it on Tisha B'Av, is the Jewish apostates. Because as bad as the Christian religion was to the Jewish people here in Spain, it was the venom of the Jewish apostates that gave us the hardest time. Maharsayich u'machrivayich mimayayich yetzeu. People by the name of Avner of Burgos, Rabbi Solomon Halevi, who is a great rabbi here in Spain. And he, under pressure, one of the great Rabbanim in Spain, he converted to Christianity. And his primary disciple, Rabbi Yoshua Halorki, defamed the Rebbe. How could he leave Judaism? How could he abandon his people? We have to stay strong. And Solomon Halevi challenged him to a disputation. And then Joshua Halorki converted to Christianity. But we can't talk about this. And it's these individuals who caused the greatest trouble for the Jewish people, the Jewish apostates. So the Ramban, now you have to know the Ramban was the greatest of all Spanish scholars. The Ritva writes in a tshuva, I believe in Reish Samachay. I have to read to you his lashon. The Ritva says, Zehu Sheva Chachmei Artzenu. You know what the greatness of Spanish scholars are? Shekibalnu Meiroya Echad Neman. That our tradition comes from one Rebbe. Gadol Yada, his hand is great. B'chol Uman. Boirer Oichal Mitach Pseles, he chooses the good. What's his name? Vayikru Es Shemai Man. Like the manna bread, the man, the Ramban. Ramosha ben Nachman. He was born in 1194. Passed away in 1270. In the year 1263, King James of Aragon accepted the invitation of Pablo Christiani, Friar Paul. And Friar Paul, also a Jewish apostate, said he will prove from the Talmud itself that the Chachmei Amoram believed that the Messiah had already come. So the Ramban was the only one who could possibly dispute him. And he goes to King James, he says, King James, I can't dispute him, I don't have freedom of speech. King James promised Ramban freedom of speech. Now, why did they choose the Ramban? The Ramban already proved himself as the only one able to navigate these difficult times. Let's say in the times of the Rambam, when the Rambam's work were put in Cherem, and they were burning the works of the Rambam. The Ramban was the only one who was able to navigate the situation, where the Ramban came up with the following compromise. The Ramban said, we shouldn't necessarily learn all the works of the Rambam, but the Rambam personally is untouchable. The Rambam as an individual is untouchable. That was the navigation of the Ramban, and he proved himself as the only one eligible to dispute Pablo Christianity. Now, this is very important. The Ramban went on the offensive in this dispute. The name of the Sefer is called Sefer HaVikuach. And Pablo Christiani brought all kinds of proofs that the Chachmei HaTalmud believed that the Messiah came, and the Ramban said, let's get things straight. The fundamental difference between Judaism and Christianity is not about the Messiah. It's about God. The Ramban writes, it's an offense to human intelligence to believe in the Trinity. It's insulting to believe in a corporeal being, a Father, a Son, a Holy Ghost. The Ramban says it's an insult to human intelligence. And he says, you want to speak about the Messiah? According to you, the Messiah came. Has peace reigned on this world? From the day that your supposed Messiah has come, more blood has been spilled in his name than for any other cause in the history of the world. And then the Ramban said that in his opinion, Christianity will bring the end of human civilization. From the moment the Roman Empire embraced Christianity, it declined. Look at the Muslim world today. As soon as Christianity came to the Roman world, Islam ascended. And that is what will continue until Christianity brings the complete decline of human civilization. That was the prediction of the Ramban. Obviously, this is just between us. It's not like this is, But these were some of the arguments of the Ramban. These arguments took place in 4 different sessions. And Pablo Christianity asked for a recess. King James of Aragon came into the Shuls here in Barcelona to give the final word. And when clearly the Ramban won, so the King James of Aragon famously said he never met someone argue so valiantly a losing cause. That was the comments of King James of Aragon. The verdict was the Ramban was required within 6 months to leave Spain. The Ramban left in 6 weeks. So he was given 6 months, he left in 6 weeks. He had to leave for 2 years, he never returned. The Ramban passed away in the year 1270. The Ramban goes to Yerushalayim, and according to many, he's buried right next to the Maras Machpelah. Some say in Akri, some say in Akko, some say there's a kever for him by the Maras Machpelah. I always think, why is the Ramban buried near the Maras Machpelah? Because the most famous teaching of the Ramban is throughout Bereshis, Maaseh Avos Siman Labanim. That is the most common theme of the Ramban. Therefore, he was zocheh to be buried right next to the Avos HaKadoshim. So the Ramban valiantly fought for Judaism and all the basic tenets of Judaism, which are recorded for posterity in the Sefer HaVikuach. And the Ramban is one of the great heroes of the Jewish people. Zechusai Yagen Aleinu V'al Kol Yisrael. Amen. So this is the oldest shul in the Iberian Peninsula, but it's also dedicated to commemorate one of the most notable personalities of the Iberian Peninsula, Rabbi Avraham Zacutto. So that's an important name to remember. He wrote a very important sefer called Sefer HaYuchsin, which traces the generations of world history from Brias HaOlam until the year 1500. He was born in 1452 till 1515. He invented the astrolabe, which is spoken about in Shulchan Aruch. The astrolabe was used by Vasco da Gama and by Christopher Columbus in all of their expeditions. Now, we spoke about many times the tragedy of 1492, so I want to share with you a very important yediyah, and that yediyah is, in order to translate a Jewish date into a secular date, what do? You add 1240. So the Spanish Inquisition took place in the year Reish Nun Beis. Reish Nun Beis. 452. So you add 1240. 252. So you add 1240. 1492. So one of the great Achronim, that lived during the time of the Spanish Inquisition, Rabbi Yosef Yavitz, not to be confused with Rabbi Yaakov Emden. Rabbi Yosef Yavitz. Yavitz is an acronym. It stands for Yitain Eitza Be'ez Tzara. Yavitz. Rabbi Yosef Yavitz. By the way, he writes that about various reasons why the Spanish Inquisition happened. By the way, Rabbi Avraham Saba says the reason why it happened is because Jews built big homes, luxurious homes. They were attractive to the eye, and it caught the attention of the Gentiles, and it created jealousy. Not that this has anything to do with American Jewry, but I thought I might point that out. Now, Rabbi Avraham Zacutto wrote the Sefer HaYuchsen. I just want to share with you one very moving paragraph and passage in the Sefer HaYuchsen. We spoke about how in Spain in 1391 there were 200,000 forcible conversions. In Portugal in 1496, Emmanuel gave the Jews 10 months to decide whether they're going to leave or convert. But he did not keep his word. So the first day of Pesach, he forcibly converted Jews. He brought them to center squares. He surrounded them. He said, convert. They didn't want to convert, so he had priests sprinkle them with water. Okay, now they're converted. He also forcibly kidnapped and baptized every last child in Portugal under the age of 14. So if you were a parent and you had a child, you never saw the child again, Rahman al-San. Now, how many exceptions were there? Was this 80%, 90%, 95%? It was 100%. No one was exempt. There were no exemptions from this decree. Says Rabbi Avraham Zacutto was one of the few Jews who was able to leave Portugal in 1496. So he writes in the Sefer HaYuchsen, Ba'avanoseinu ro'inu, in the year Reish Nun Beis, 252, 1492. In the year Nun Vav Reish. What's Nun Vav Reish? 1496. After the expulsion from Portugal, we didn't know where to go. We couldn't go to France. We couldn't go to Spain. I was an old man. I was with my son Shmuel. Gamani Hashem Baruch Hashem. Zikani Sha'akadesh Shemoi Im Shmuel Bani. I was Zoicha to Mekadesh Im Shamayim. I did not endure forcible conversion. Ubanu La Africa. Rabbi Avraham Zacutto went to Africa. Which country? He came to Tunis. He was captured 2 times. Hashem leman chasadav v'rachamav hagdolim yashlim li ulazari. May the Almighty pay me back. Sheyia acharisenu la'avodas Hashem. That the end of my family, we should be servants of God. Yisbarach. Ulatayrasai. V'yasim chalkenu im hatzadikim. Hashem, please place the share of the destiny of my family with the righteous. Began Eden. Uvetchias hamesim. Ulabinyan Beit Midrash. So here we are, 500 years later, in the Rabbi Avraham Zacutto Museum. He was one of the few people who withstood the temptation of conversion, and he's praying to the Almighty that the destiny of his family should be among the righteous. And he hopes for the 3 big keys that every Jew should hope for: Gan Eden, Tchias HaMesim, Ubinyan Beit HaMikdash. Amen.
Louis XVI had his relationship with Marie Antoinette. Louis XV had his thing about furniture. But do you know about Louis IX, the king who tried to wipe out Judaism once and for all? Crowned in 1226, Louis IX was the type of king who liked to take justice into his own hands. He'd often personally judge cases and deliver punishments in his great hall in Paris. And he also had a thing about the Jews. He forced Jews into manual labor with the Ordinance of Milan in 1230 and liked to debate Jews about their religion. In 1232, Pope Gregory IX received a letter claiming that the Talmud, the enormous Jewish text that had defined Jewish practice since being compiled in the 5th century, attacked the Catholic Church at least 35 times and needed to be destroyed. If the Pope agreed, there would be no more Talmud, and as an added bonus, no more Jewish practice. The Pope announced that the Talmud was going to be put on trial and instructed all Catholic institutions in France, Italy, Spain, and Portugal to seize all copies in their midst. Officials burst into synagogues and confiscated precious handwritten volumes of the Talmud from synagogues across Europe. 2 months later, the Talmud was put on trial, and can you guess who oversaw it? Yup, this guy. King Louis IX ordered 4 prominent rabbis to defend the Talmud. They faced off against Nicholas Donin, a Parisian Jew who had abandoned his faith and converted to Catholicism. Donin was not a fan of Judaism. He was also the one who'd written the damning letter to the Pope that started this crisis. King Louis set the rules. Rule number 1, the rabbis couldn't criticize Christianity in any way. And if rule number 2 could have been announced, it would have been that there's no way the Jews can win. The trial did not go well. At one point, King Louis got so enraged he shouted that a good Christian would plunge his sword into a Jew and not debate. One rabbi had to flee for his life. The remaining prominent rabbis argued all they could, but the Talmud was found guilty and condemned to burning. 2 years later, officials searched all over France for any remaining volumes of Talmud and other Hebrew books. On June 17, 1242, 24 wagons deposited close to 10,000 books at the Place de Grève near Notre Dame Cathedral, where they were burned. After the trial, King Louis expelled the Jews from France and led crusades to the Holy Land that targeted Jewish communities along the way. And even with his crimes against the Jews, they still named a city after him. How about that for history?
Hello friends, we're standing in Würzburg and we got permission to come down to see this huge vault here full of gravestones that were used to build a monastery in a church of a nunnery. And all these stones over here, 1,500 of them were revealed, and also gives a lot of information, historical information, to teach us how many of the great sages and rabbis worked in Würzburg itself. We had one upstairs. We saw one that was from the daughter of the Ravan, Rabbi Eliezer ben Natan, was from the first Balatoisvis. We didn't even know that he actually lived there in Würzburg, and also from other big Balatoisvis that had lived here in this place. Also from the Raviu. If you look around, you see all the 1,500 of these stones that were taken from that monastery. Looks like the bishop had sold it to them to use it to build the church of the monastery.
During World War I, the Russian army entered Romania and instilled fear in its population. Every family was required to host Russian soldiers or risk being thrown out of their homes. The Friday night after the army entered into the town of Tomar, Rabbi Chaim Zilber and his family were at the Shabbos table. As Rabbi Zilber held the cup of wine in his hands, ready to recite Kiddush, there was a loud banging at the door. Russian soldiers demanded to be allowed in immediately, but Rabbi Zilber didn't stop reciting Kiddush. It was as if nothing else existed other than the sacred words he was saying. Rabbi Chaim's wife, Esther, went to slowly open the front door, and the soldiers shoved her aside, pushing the door open and barking orders at the children. But then they saw the angelic-looking man standing before them, and everything changed. His serenity caused the barbaric soldiers to stand in silence and awe. Completely immersed in his thoughts and prayer, Rabbi Chaim paid no attention to the commotion. The captain of the group, a large and tough-looking individual, motioned to the soldiers to clear the room and wait outside. Once they left, Rabbi Zilber finished Kiddush and offered the soldiers some wine. The captain burst into tears. After a few minutes, he calmed down and said to the rabbi, "When I was a little boy, I was taken from my parents' home. The soldiers came on a Friday night in 2 black cars. They placed my parents in one car and me in the other. I never saw my parents again." With tears streaming down his face, he continued, "My parents called me Shmuel. I can still see my father standing there, just like you were, reciting Kiddush. As the soldiers dragged my parents away, my father called out to me, 'Shmuel, remember that you are a Jew. Never forget it.'" The captain wiped his tears and said, "But I was only 3 years old, and after all these years, I forgot where I came from. Only now, as I watched you hold your cup exactly like my father, did it all come back to me." The soldiers were waiting outside, but the captain was in no rush. He joined Rabbi Chaim Zilber and his family for the Shabbos meal. At the end, he thanked them for the beautiful experience. He placed his cap on his head, wiped away his tears, and stepped out into the street, feeling at peace with himself. Captain Shmuel had found his way home. Shmuel returned to the Zilber home every Friday night and began learning about his Jewish heritage and went on to live a Jewish life. Our lives may not be as dramatic as Shmuel's story, but that same Jewish spark, that Pintel Yid, exists inside all of us, yearning to be heard and nurtured, to find its way back home.
Jerusalem, the most famous city in the world. It remained unchanged throughout the centuries. The streets and bazaars within the old city are the same today as they were in the Middle Ages. But older than these by far are the memories which bind the Jewish people to Palestine, the birthplace of their religion and their nationhood. Yesterday, only a handful of Jews could be found in Palestine. They lived in poverty, but clung to the country for the sake of its memories. Most of them had come in their old age from distant countries to die in Palestine and be buried in its sacred soil. Oriental Jews, Sephardim, had always been part of the Palestinian scene. Their life resembled in externals the life of the surrounding people, but it had in it more than an echo of the patriarchal civilization which is mirrored in the book of Genesis. Within them, these Jews carried the undying tradition of the Jewish past, as well as the hope of a glorious Jewish future. From the Arabian Peninsula came the Jews of Yemen, always accompanied by the eternal book, in which they read from childhood on, generation after generation, keeping its words alive. Palestine was a land of tombs, and among them the Jews wept for the restoration of the glory of Zion. Through the ages, the Jews made pilgrimages to all these places, filled with holy memories, to add their prayers to those of their ancestors, that the scattered children of Israel be gathered again into the shelter of their own homeland. The holiest place is the Wailing Wall.
Although we lived for a long, long time with the Arabs without really having problems, but June the 1st, 1941, in our house, we heard a lot of noise outside, people shouting, "Idbah al-Yahud, Idbah al-Yahud," which means cut the throat of the Jews. I climbed the tree as high as I can just to try to see if I can what's happening outside.
You were then what?
9 years old.
9 years old.
And I saw a lot of people there with swords in their hands, some rifles and shooting. And I just couldn't understand why they shouting, "Idbah al-Yahud." What the hell did I do at 9 years old? They were killing me. I saw that our landlord, who was our next door neighbor, we called him a Haji because he went to Mecca in those days and he wore a green turban. He took a chair and he sat right in front of our house. So when the mob came into our house, they stopped right in front of him. I didn't know what he was saying, or they saying to him. I only found out later that he told them there is a woman there, a widow, with many young children, and she asked for his protection. If they want to go in to take them, to kill them, they have to kill himself first. So we were really saved by this religious Muslim. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here. And then they started putting fire to the houses. So that whole evening and night, fires are all over. And still screams were people being murdered and raped. Until the next day, the British Army came in, and together with the mayor of Baghdad, the police took over again, and we were saved.
One of the largest scale rescue missions during the Holocaust is also one of its least known. It involves an unlikely friendship between a Romanian businessman and a Salvadoran diplomat, who together broke laws, forged documents, and saved tens of thousands of lives by doing so. José Arturo Castellanos Contreras was born in El Salvador in 1893. His father was a general, so at 16 years old, Castellanos entered a prestigious military school and spent the following 2 decades in the Salvadoran army. He found success in the military, climbing all the way to the Army's second chief of staff, but his career was cut short when he was made a Salvadoran diplomat to Europe. El Salvador's then president, Maximiliano Hernández Martínez, had risen to power in a coup and was murdering dissidents. Unintimidated by this, Castellanos called the government fascist and repeatedly spoke out against the president. Rather than kill him, the president sent Castellanos away to England and then to Germany on the eve of World War II. Castellanos arrived in Germany in 1938 and witnessed firsthand the Nazi-sponsored terrorism against the Jewish community. In November of that year, German civilians and Nazi forces took to the streets and attacked Jewish homes, synagogues, and businesses. The mob beat people in public, and over 30,000 Jewish men were sent to death camps. The event is known as Kristallnacht, or Night of Broken Glass, named for the shards that littered German streets where storefront windows had been smashed in. Dismayed, Castellanos Contreras wrote to El Salvador's foreign minister and asked for permission to grant visas to Jews attempting to flee Europe. His request was denied, and he was swiftly sent to Switzerland for fear that he would rock the boat with Germany. There he met Romanian Jewish businessman Georgi Mendel, who had fled to Switzerland in the summer of 1942. Even though Switzerland was a neutral country, it had strict refugee laws, and Mendel and his family were at risk of deportation. As their friendship developed, Castellanos started to formulate a plan to help Georgi. For the second time, Castellanos appealed to the Salvadoran government for permission to grant visas to refugees. Again, they refused. But this time, Castellanos took matters into his own hands. With falsified documents, he gave Mendel a new identity and Salvadoran citizenship, changing his name from Georgi Mendel to George Mantelo. While the citizenship papers could potentially save Georgi from deportation, it could not ensure his safety. So Castellanos took it a step further and appointed Mendel as the first secretary of El Salvador's Swiss Council. Essentially, Castellanos gave Mendel an official position that didn't exist. Regardless of their lives being in danger, Castellanos and Mendel were concerned with the many more lives at risk. They started a rescue operation by recreating the very certificates that Castellanos made to save Mendel's life and sent them to Jewish recipients in all corners of Nazi-occupied Europe. Mendel hired college students in Switzerland to help him forge what became thousands of fake documents. Most, if not all, of the recipients had never set foot in El Salvador. And yet, a single piece of paper with his country's name on it provided at least some hope of survival. Mendel and Castellanos are among the many unsung heroes of World War II. Mendel would receive recognition for his deeds before dying in 1992, but Castellanos' role would not be recognized until after his death. You see, after the war, Castellanos returned to El Salvador. He lived out the rest of his days in relative obscurity, and he never saw his act as heroic. He truly believed he did what anyone in his position would do. He simply saw a friend in danger and did what was necessary to help him. It is estimated that the secret mission of Castellanos and Mendel may have saved anywhere from 10,000 to 40,000 lives, perhaps more.
In 1946, in Deutsches Museum in Munich, I went to that huge cedar. About 12, maybe 1,400 people sitting, and the chaplain of the American Army, of course they were all American soldiers, and the chaplain of the American Army conducted the seder like it was at home, where the food was exactly like we had at home. The amazing thing, when you saw I don't know how many waiters there were. They came out from outside one after the other in those white jackets and both legs, you know, open mouth. Couldn't believe it.
My memory is taking me back now to the last Seder I had in Warsaw Ghetto in 1943. And we didn't have a Seder, but it was the Seder night that the Germans declared Unrein. And that was the day when the Jewish people took up arms and started Warsaw Ghetto uprising. And as it happened, I am very privileged to have met some of the fighters. So the Warsaw Ghetto uprising started on a Saturday night.
It was 1946 in Italy, in presence of the Jewish Palestine Brigade. Can you imagine our feeling? And I can't talk. That we're sitting around soldiers from the Israeli army, and they're speaking about freeing us. They were fighting for us. We did not know that time when we were in the camps that the Jewish Palestine Brigade were fighting together with the British Army in freed us. And then one officer said a very important thing that I'm repeating now when I'm talking to children in the Holocaust Museum, that our generation is a unique generation. When you come to, in every generation, we have to see ourselves, so to speak, that we were slaves. We don't have to say so. We don't have to say the word ilu, because we were slaves.
Shabbos Zuktober, Teuses vermeiders, Shabbos durch Beine. So hat ich kein Digma. So gereicht meine Brüder in Amerika. Sollt halten Shabbos, und es geht's an. Man meint die Shabbos mit den Damen, nichts tun im Shabbos, es kommt halten Shabbos.
In 1941, residents of the Kovna ghetto served as forced laborers, aiding the Nazi military. Rabbi Ephraim Ushry was assigned the relatively easy task of removing lice from the soldiers' clothes.
Het gehad hat Feres Bachirim. Was man jeden Tag gelernt, alle Tag hat man gelernt mit Bachirim. Und mit dieser Fleißigkeit und mit dieser Brenn muss ich mein Feldpel gewähnen lernen. Der Bucher der Zeit ist gewesen, zusammen in Kovna Ghetto mit meinen Taten. Wir hatten gefragt, wieso haben die Bucher getracht, sich in dieser Eiszure? Wieso haben sie gar den Kopf zu lernen? Haben sie geämpft, dass weil sie gewiss, dass sie gehen morgen weg von der Welt, haben sie gewiss, dass sie haben nicht mehr wie das auf der Welt noch teure, haben sie so gelernt, dass sie Fleißigkeit, wie es wohl kein Wunsch geben, dass sie mir Simche, dass sie mir Israski.
In 1943, Rabbi Shapiro, the rabbi of Kovna, passed away. Bereft of leadership, the people turned to Ushry with their pressing questions regarding Jewish law. He later wrote, "The inquiries to which I responded were neither academic questions posed by scholars, nor scenarios proposed by eccentrics playing theoretical games. They were questions asked by ordinary Jews who refused to be turned into instinctive animals in search of bare survival. These Jews tenaciously upheld their obligation under the divine covenant to observe to the best of their ability, even in the ghetto, the commandments of God's Torah, the divine blueprint of true human civilization. Ashri jotted down notes regarding the questions and answers and hid them in the ground. After the war, he dug them up and elaborated on the sources. These questions were the basis of his 5-volume series of responsa about the Holocaust. He later wrote, "I dug up my notes and proceeded to examine the sources at greater length. Only then did I begin to perceive the significance of the questions as an indelible record of Jewish uniqueness. Did our enemies ask their priests and ministers how to care for the Jewish dead? Were they concerned about whether one may use clothes stolen from a dead Jew? Did they receive dispensation to bayonet pregnant women? In contrast, I was asked detailed, astonishingly moving questions. Jews asked, what were the proper blessings to say after eating when one was forced to eat on a fast day? They asked me the correct form of a blessing one would say before going to one's death in sanctification of God. What do you say to a Jew who is a Jew unto his death? It is so elementary that tears are not sufficient."
Yes, I would like to say a great deal. I would like to call upon all those people who will see this, never to forget. Never to forget that there is only one way to remember our people, and that is to live for them. I ask you to please light the Shabbos candles for them. Make Shabbos. I ask you to study the Torah for them. Make Torah part of your life and make the mitzvahs part of your life.
And for the people who don't know how to light the Shabbos candles, could you tell the bracha for it?
Start studying. It's not just the bracha. It's a whole way of life. It's so easy to study today. There are so many rabbis who would love to teach you. Just go and learn and bring God into your home, because otherwise Hitler will have had victory. There is a teaching in Eicha, that's Lamentations. Gadol kayam shivrech miyapelach, greater than the sea, deeper than the sea is the pain of my people. Who can heal her? Who can bring healing? Who can bring balm to our people? You can. You, the ones who survived, can, by studying for them, by praying for them, by living for them. When I say living for them, studying for them, praying for them, not praying for their memory, but continuing the life of the Jewish people. Bring God into your home. Make Shabbos part of your life. Make Torah study part of your life. So it should be natural for your children. It should be part of their heritage. Otherwise, even though we make these memorials for Holocaust, it's just another monument. We do not need monuments. We need living Jews who will continue the heritage. We are not a nation that survives through bricks and stones, or even through films. This message is the only thing that counts, that we should live for them, that Am Yisrael should continue to live, to thrive till Mashiach will come, till the Messiah comes.
אברהם אבינו, שאברהם אבינו היה ידוע שהוא היה ידיד השם, פרסם אלוקות בעולם, לכן קראנו לו אברהם ידידיה. אך הילד הזה לא זכה להאריך ימים. בגיל 5.5 חודש הוא השיב את נשמתו לבוראו. הוא לא היה חולה לו שום דבר, פשוט לא קם בבוקר. היות והילד הזה נולד פה בחברון ונימול במערת המכפלה על יד קברו של אברהם אבינו, החלטתי שהוא יהיה היהודי הראשון שיקבר פה בבית העלמין העתיק שבחברון, שקבורים פה קדושי עליון. הגענו לצומת הזכוכית וביקשו ממני לרדת מהרכב, והחיילים, ואמרו לי, גברת נחשון, יש לנו הוראה מפורשת לא לתת לך לקבור את הבן לחברון. אחרי כשעה בצומת הגיע אלוף הפיקוד לשכנע את האמא ולעבוד על האמא שלטובתה כדאי לה לקבור את הבן בירושלים. אמרתי לו, אתה מאמין שאת חברון יחזירו? זה מה שהוא אמר. אני מאמינה שחברון שייכת לעם היהודי. ולכן אני לא אוותר, ואני אקבור הלילה את הבן שלי פה בבית העלמין העתיק שבחברון. ביקשתי מהבחורים שהיו איתי והורדנו את הנפטר מהרכב, וכשהם ראו אותי עם התינוק צועדת ברגל, כולם רצו לאלחוטים, אז עוד לא היה פלאפונים, ואחרי איזה 100 מטר הם באו אליי, החיילים, גברת נחשון, תעלי על הקומנד קאר, תעלי על הג'יפ, יש לך אישור משר הביטחון לקבור את הבן שלך בחברון. הגעתי לפה, איפה שאני יושבת כרגע, הכל היה מסביב, אני זוכרת מלא אנשים. אמרתי שההיסטוריה היא כאין מעגל. אברהם אבינו קנה חלקת אדמה לשרה אשתו פה בחברון, ואני, שמי שרה, קונה היום חלקת אדמה לאברהם בני באותו מקום, רק הפרש של 3,000 שנה.
Within days of the beginning of the war, Rabbi Avraham Wolf and his wife Chaya rented multiple hotel rooms in Berlin to get the orphans to safety.
We started a refugee camp in Berlin with all of our orphans. We took a hotel in the part of Berlin that used to be a camp of the communist secret police and where Putin played billiards. We rented from there 170 rooms in the hotel. We opened a preschool, school, and a university there.
Back in Odessa, the community now had an empty building with a bomb shelter.
We took out the beds, put in the desks and the chairs. During the war, everybody came here to study together because we have a bomb shelter that we renovated and heated. Now it's possible to stay here for many hours.
Children from the local Jewish community, as well as Jewish families who fled other cities, use the building for school and more.
We have 112 children who study every day from 8 a.m. till 6 p.m. Whoever wants can leave at 4 p.m. Others can stay till 6 p.m. with group activities and homework and whatever the children need. The children get 4 meals a day here. They get free transportation. Everything is free. We receive everyone who wants to study at a Jewish school with great joy.
Nechama Vigler, who runs the school, took CBN News down to the bomb shelter.
There are days when we spend more time in the bomb shelter than in the classrooms upstairs. Unfortunately, during the last year, this is the main entertainment place of our children. Here we study, eat, play, and sometimes we stay here until the late hours of the night, until we're able to release the children to go home.
Vigler says that even though all the children have homes, many live without electricity or heat.
So the school today is more than the place to provide knowledge and to study. This is the place for children to live, to meet people. Here we have a generator, so we have electricity and heating and food, breakfast and lunch. And here the children get strength because most of them come from dark homes without electricity and return to dark homes, which is a shocking and difficult thing.
She says despite conditions, young children have a positive attitude.
The children are amazing people. I can come in the morning feeling down and I receive energy from the children. They always see the good side and always with a smile, especially the younger ones. For the older children, it's more complicated. Their feelings are difficult. Talking to them and hearing what's on their hearts, doubts, fear of the future is really not easy. It's complicated and difficult.
Vigler says the people of Odessa remain strong, even after suffering through a tough winter.
I feel the drop in energy, but the people, all of them, are confident in the victory, not willing to give up, and I feel they're united. This has united the nation in an amazing way.
She says no matter where people live, it's important to care about others.
I think that at the end of the day, each person, regardless of where you live, in the States or Israel, all of us are emissaries. Each one of us can be a light.
Wolf says it will take a miracle for the war to end soon.
Other than a miracle, it's impossible to explain it because the way it looks, it's going to be a long story. But we're believing people. We renovated the synagogue, renovated the orphanages to receive the children, other buildings. We're confident that everything will be well. God will protect us. There will be miracles.
And after a year in Berlin, 120 orphans returned home to Odessa to separate girls' and boys' homes. And the school is continuing. Shortly after their return, they celebrated one boy's birthday together with Purim, marking the Jews' deliverance from an evil plot to destroy them, as told in the Book of Esther. And now they seem happy to be home. Julie Stahl, CBN News, Odessa, Ukraine.
Şimdi ekip profesör, 10 numara, profesyonel ekip. Geldi, biz kendi çabamızla asla bir şey yapamazdık. Bu ekibe çok teşekkür ediyorum. Geldiler, nokta atışı cihazlarla yeğenlerimin bulunduğu Elif, Zeynep olduğu yeri nokta atışıyla bu ekip tam isabetle buldular. Biz uğraşmış olsaydık belki de yeğenlerimizi kaybederdik. Bu ekip cihaz, kendiler profesör hep 10 numara atış buldular. Thank you. Thank you. İsrail, teşekkür. Teşekkür.
Every time I meet people and when I told them that I'm a Mashiach in Nigeria, the first question is, there's a Jewish people in Nigeria. Where is Nigeria?
When they actually come here and they see the work, what we're doing here, they understand.
Nigeria has an import ban on a lot of products. Where am I going to find matzah? Where am I going to find kosher wine? When I got here, I didn't think of it, I didn't have a mezuzah.
It is very hard to maintain our culture, and you are forgetting who you are.
I come my first time in Nigeria in 2008 to assist the Jewish community for different Jewish holiday.
ישראל היה מאוד נחוש שהוא הגיע לכאן. כאילו פה זה המקום, הבנו גם למה שנה אחרי זה הוא הביא את חיה איתו.
We just got married in 2010 and my husband told me, oh, you know what? They called me from Nigeria and they want us to come for a day camp for kids because they are out of school. And I was like, yeah, why not? That's great, honeymoon. So I went with them and it was not what I expected.
It was not an easy decision. For me, it was impossible to come here with a family and to stay here for so long time.
Mele darf jeder wissen, als die in Jormen, wo der Rebbe Tafema aufgelegt, hat davon genommen, die erste Sache, die Hero begolui, was hat gehabt von Reben. Das ist, der Rebbe hat ihm geheißen, soll kommen in der und der Stadt. Und soll sich vernehmen mit Asamin Arbeit oder Avede Sachino oder Chizokate. Oder lernen alle Weis mit Kindern. Hat angenommen, hat die Hero begolui und hat ihr mit Male gewählt. Und Mele, das ist ein Schwiches.
שלום לכולם מניגריה. כשמדברים על החום ועל הרוח, אז יש לנו פה את הרב ישראל אוזן, שמנהל פה את בית חב"ד. בעצם את כל הישראלים והקהילה היהודית פה, זאת הרוח שזורמת פה מאחורי כולנו.
We opened different synagogue, different shul in Nigeria to give opportunity for everyone to have synagogues close to him.
אנחנו מקיימים פה תפילות בלילות שבת וביום שבת. תודה לאל, יש לנו מניין.
We start the year with the high holiday. We have also a program for Sukkot. We have more than 4 mobile sukkah go all around Nigeria. And when Hanukkah comes, we usually have a tradition to organize a concert. On Purim, we will make sure that the kids have the opportunity to come with his costume and to listen to Megillah. Pesach also is one of the most important holidays. So we try to make sure that we can organize Passover night all around Nigeria. Like B'Omer, we do a nice parade with the kids. On Shavuot is a time we listen to the Ten Commandments and then we open a nice buffet.
מעבר לזה, גם יש לנו את השבתות. הם מארחים את כל מי שרק רוצה, והשולחן פתוח וערוך מכל הבא ליד.
אני חושבת שזה לפעמים ישראל השנייה, כי כשאתה הולך לפעילויות, אתה לא מרגיש כאילו אתה כאן, אתה מרגיש כאילו אתה בישראל.
For us, the aspects of the Jewish families and the children are most of our shlichus.
כמעט כל יום ראשון, ישראל היה מגיע, ממש מלמדים גם עברית וגם שיעורים שמקרבים מהתנ"ך, מקרבים ליהדות, שנותנים לילדים את החיבור לארץ.
So we start with the preschool in this one small apartment that we rent here in Abuja. Since 2016 we inaugurated the big school that we have today.
הילדה הקטנה שלי למדה אצל חיה בגן חב"ד, לימדו אותם עברית, הם לימדו אותם על החגים, כל יום שישי עושים קבלת שבת בגן, עושים חלות. הגן היה מדהים.
You should see my young children when they're going to that school. They can't wait every morning.
בית חב"ד דואג לכך שבכל חג תהיה פעילות לילדים על מנת ללמד אותם ולהזכיר להם למה חוגגים את החג הזה ואיזה מנהגים נוהגים לחגוג בחג הזה.
פעילות תמיד מעניינות וגם מלמדות.
This past week we just had a matzah bakery. The children had to mix the flour in the water and make the dough and roll it and bake it and eat it with chocolate and whipping cream.
הכי טוב האפיקומן. כן, וגם להכין מצות.
אני חושבת שחב"ד של ניגריה שעושה עבודה מדהימה. שהחיים שלנו פה נראים הרבה יותר טוב בזכותם.
ברוך השם, לא לפני הרבה זמן הייתה פה שחיטה ראשונה כשרה, ואז גם לקחתי על עצמי להתחיל לאכול רק שחיטה כשרה.
When we started the shlichut here in Nigeria, the first goal was for sure to have a mikveh.
One day he came to me that he is desperately looking for a land for a mikveh. I said, no problem, we can do it.
And Baruch Hashem, with the partnership of some company here and businessman, we get the land.
I remember going to places to see tiles. We contacted two architects from France and they helped us put out a beautiful plan. And then we worked with a company here that imports European tiles and Baruch Hashem, we got like the dream mikveh in Nigeria.
I visited the Mir Yeshiva, which is the largest yeshiva in Israel, one of the, maybe the largest in the world, where thousands of students, Israelis, Americans, British and other nationalities, sit and study together in furtherance of the mitzvah of studying Torah. I had a chance to meet not only the Rosh Yeshiva, but some of the very bright students themselves, and sit with them and learn a little bit about the passage of Gemara that they're studying relating to property disputes.
Tell me what you're studying today.
How you can get the ownership of a house.
And what if two people have worked it at the same 3 years and both claim it?
Then shoots them together, works together, then it should work together.
It's a very impressive operation. It's huge and demonstrates the commitment of that community to sustaining the Jewish people and the Jewish traditions through study.
Do they all study the same portion at the same time?
Basically, there's a mainstream text that's learned, and there are different groups that learn other things who they continue their studies.
Then I came to visit Bidomai Chayi. an organization that creates cord blood bank to allow stem cells to be harvested from the blood of umbilical cords, which is a life-saving therapy in the cases of many genetic diseases that particularly afflict ethnic minorities within Israel and within the Jewish community. I was honored to help dedicate a new laboratory in which they're processing and storing the cord blood for future use.
זה כן מפעל חסד, אני הייתי אומר זה עבודת קודש. הצלת החיים, אין עבודה יותר חשובה.
I think what I saw was, in some ways, two different aspects of the Haredi community. That which is devoted to sustaining the traditional way of life that Haredim believe very strongly in, and that in which the Haredi community can also contribute to the broader Israeli society, as increasing numbers are doing, finding ways to enter the workforce by joining the army. A strong, cohesive Israeli society is an American interest, and so we have a great interest in seeing Haredim and all Israelis join together in a common, cohesive society.
Just as humans have a 7-day cycle in our weeks, so the land of Israel itself has a 7-year cycle. And on the 7th day, just as we rest, like it says in the 10 Commandments, to rest and make that day holy, so every 7 years we take the 7th year and the land rests and the fruit become holy. So we're not meant to work the land during that year, we're meant to let her rest. And what that really does for the Jewish people and what it's meant to teach the world is most people sort of see the earth and, well, how can we extract whatever we need as some sort of tool in our shed of what we need to accomplish? And Shemitah teaches us that the land is alive. We have a relationship with her. It's not something that we can just use and abuse, but just like we have Shabbat, the land has Shabbat. When the Jewish people are outside of the land becomes sad, goes into exile. When the Jewish people come back, she comes back to life again. She becomes happy again. And it's teaching us to not only connect to God, but to connect to nature itself, to connect to the land itself, and through that connect to God. And so this year is a sabbatical year, so there's no farmers working in the land. We're just letting the land rest and giving it back to God.
So the Torah tells us that one of the reasons for the exile that we endured for thousands of years was because we as a nation did not respect the sabbatical year, the Shemitah year. So God said, I will exile from your land so the land can have the sabbaticals that it's owed, that it deserves. And so now we're back in the land and we want to learn that lesson. We have a lot of lessons to learn from the exile that we endured, but one of them is to respect and honor the land as a gift that God has entrusted us with, but it doesn't belong to us. We belong to the land. The whole land belongs to God, especially on the sabbatical year, and it's a reminder of the truth of this world.